Welcome to Hara and Josh talking about hot button issues. Today, more on the environment, especially around what difference do one person's actions make. Our disagreement and fireworks come after we talk about the strong Trump supporter, so stay tuned for that. Although we both take issue with people of many political views, not just on the right, not just on the left. A main point is when you actually act, and not out of coercion or what's the smallest thing you can do, but something really meaningful, something where you change something about your life. You learn that it improves your life with no loss. If you measure her change that she talks about in the beginning of this conversation, you're looking at the y-intercept. You miss the slope. I read that she's starting, not ending or leveling off. But listen for yourself. One of the main points is that anyone can start at any time. If you're ready to start and go through the transition to awareness and consciousness and action and more action that she went through, which listen for yourself, but it sounds like it's improving her life. I recommend watching my first TEDx talk to learn the technique that got her started. I'll link to that talk in my podcast to hear it in practice in hundreds of conversations in the text. The main topics that we cover, at the beginning, Hara shares about acting environmentally becoming a part of her life, raising awareness and consciousness at no cost. Next, we talk about my motivation for environmental action and the basis of it in the US Constitution, not where most people expect to find environmental action foundation. Next, my interaction on the environment with the strong Trump supporter. I think you'll find the story interesting of how it came about and what's come of it. And stay tuned for future episodes because that relationship is evolving. Next, we talk about our mutual annoyance at what both of us saw as self-righteousness from many environmental people, making acting adversarial, ending up counterproductive. Now, the talking over and past each other came with defining what a fact is and how to engage and influence people we disagree with. Do we talk about facts or do we do something different? Listening now afterward, I'm not too proud to say that I'm embarrassed at how much I interrupted her. I hope for you as listeners that you enjoy the conversation more for it. Well, we don't solve all the world's problems, but I haven't heard this conversation anyplace else. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to Hara and Josh talking about hot button issues. We're here in the Psychology Today offices again. And how are you doing, Hara?
I'm doing good.
I kind of wanted to talk about something that came up recently, which I just told you about, which is my being on this hardcore Trump supporting site talking about the environment, which is not the place most people would think about talking about the environment. You also mentioned how something about you attributed to me has insinuated itself into your behavior.
Yes, let me spare you the awkwardness of describing that. But the fact is, Josh, that you have insinuated yourself into my life. There are very few actions that I can take in my house without somehow thinking of things that you said that make me aware, more conscious of what I'm doing, whether it's turning on the water, whether it's cleaning the counter, how I'm doing and being wasteful. And in general, just reoriented me to thinking about waste. Not that it wasn't on my mind, but it was on my mind in a more general way and maybe in a guilty way of not wanting to be wasteful, and knowing that I have a lot of possessions that I'm not sure I necessarily agree with having. And what you've done is not guilt trip me, not even, I don't think you've even intended directly to create such an effect, but made me aware in a way so that now instead of feeling guilty, I'm really more oriented to taking a little action to fix whatever is an issue of concern at that moment relating to the environment. Waste of any kind or an action that could be done in a less harmful way, even a minuscule action, because it all adds up.
Can you give an example of what you did before, what changed, and what you do now?
So, just simple things of turning off the water when I'm brushing my teeth, not using paper towels or reusing a paper towel if I have to use a paper towel on the counter. How I'm going to reuse the clothing of which I have way too much. So these are things that really are affecting me on a day-to-day basis.
Those are the domains. What specifically did you pick clothing or pick the brushing teeth? What did you used to do and how did you used to feel? What do you do now and how do you feel now?
So, for example, just standing at the sink, turn on the cold water, wet my toothbrush, brush my teeth, and the water's running. I didn't really think much of it. And now I make a point of turning off the water as I brush my teeth until I need to rinse my mouth. And then I might take a little handful of water and turn off the water so that I'm not letting it run, not wasting it.
And so what's the emotion? What emotions did you used to feel? And what emotions do you feel now?
I'm not sure I ever felt any emotion about it, but what I feel now is aware that a little action is an action. I feel good that I'm doing something. And it reminds me of my connection to you. So I smile because, oh, this is my friend.
So it's an increased awareness and feeling good.
Right.
And I'm going to add in, this is not costing you anything.
No.
It doesn't take extra time, doesn't take any.
No.
And is the awareness, is that a bother? Is it a good thing? It could be something that distracts you from other things. Or maybe it's something that you don't even notice anymore.
No. In fact, it's the opposite. It has almost a Buddhist effect in that it puts you much more in the moment, into the action of what you're doing, present for brushing your teeth. This action which we do several times a day, depending on your hygiene habits. But you do it, and I did it unthinkingly before. I just did it. It was a routine, and now I do it intentionally, more intentionally, so that I'm aware that I'm wasting the water and don't want to do it anymore.
Now, I don't think I ever talked to you about brushing teeth in water. I don't think I ever talked to you about your clothing.
No.
I did talk to you. I led you into talking to me about paper towels.
Right.
So how did it go from paper towels to these other things? What prompted it?
Because water is a precious resource, clean water, and while we have plenty of it in New York, we don't have infinite resources, and we certainly don't have plenty of it in other places I've been recently, like LA. And it's important to conserve. And it just made me aware. And every drop does count. If you've ever had a leaky faucet, you know that it adds up.
You mean a leaky faucet that you put a container underneath and then you come back and, that filled up quick.
Yeah, right, yeah. Right. Or had a leak in a sink and you come home and you find a flood.
Or read about, I think it was Johannesburg. Was it Johannesburg? A city in South Africa had this big day zero thing where they were going to run out of water. They weren't going to be able to provide water for drinking. And until apparently I can't cite a source here, so I could be off, but apparently the rich neighborhoods weren't really reducing their consumption that much. Mm-hmm. And turns out when they got them to, and when they, not regulated, when they already regulated, but until they held accountable, until they published publicly how much water people were using, mm-hmm. When they did that, people started reducing their consumption. And it made it's huge. It's like, well, when you're running out of water for the whole city, every bit does count. Right,
but there's an additional effect. And the effect isn't just, I feel good because I did this, and this is going to help us environmentally. The effect, there's a spillover in the sense that, I did something that works, there's an awareness, this intention of an act, and paying attention to an action, and that spills over. I'm not sure that I know all the things it spills over to, and I'm not sure anyone could predict in advance. It just creates this little flame of awareness that burns. It's sort of like a pilot light that just keeps going and becomes very useful in a whole array of other situations.
If I'm reading you right, when I asked how'd you get to other things other than what you and I talked about, you said because every bit of water matters. But this awareness, I think, my hunch, my read is that you're seeing the water as one thing, but it's the expectation, and tell me if I'm wrong, but there's an expectation of greater awareness. There's an expectation of greater, the way that you're feeling. You have, like, you feel that way in one place. I'm reading it as something that you like. And you see, oh, there's another place where I can do it. There's yet another place I can do it. And that you're looking increasingly for places that you can find this awareness.
I don't feel that it's actually that I'm consciously looking for. The awareness itself has a life of its own, and it just crops up in an array of other places where I'm not even necessarily aware that I'm looking for things to do differently, but I become aware that it's possible. And I like that feeling. That's the part I like, the increased consciousness that I can't predict where it's going to show up.
I'm reading a kid in a candy store, but instead of candy, it's emotional reward.
Yes, there's an emotional reward. I would definitely say that.
And that you're kind of like, you're looking at the shelves and being like, oh, I can get that, instead of Swedish fish and gummy bears, it's the feeling of, I didn't pollute this paper. I didn't pollute that water.
It's not even that negative. It's not, oh, I didn't pollute. It's that I can do something that is a little bit helpful helpful to the environment at the same time that this is a little bit helpful to my awareness of the way I'm living my life.
So I can't help but go back to the Buddhist way you described it and think you're like a Buddhist in
in a candy store.
Yeah, but not a candy store. It's like an emotional reward store. It's a path to enlightenment store. I don't want to go too far into it.
No, but it's true. There's a consciousness effect, and that's a very pleasant effect. I don't know how to describe it any other way.
It's to me the opposite of sleepwalking through life.
Exactly. And it makes you more aware of what you're doing all the time.
So how do you read people who are sleepwalking and say, look, I understand the environment is important. I understand fitness is important. I understand diet is important. But look, I'm just trying to live my life. I want to put my kids through college. I want to have a safe automobile. I don't want to deal with all this like green stuff. I presume that you have some of that in you. And
a lot of it.
Who doesn't?
Right.
And how does that perspective look to you now? I mean, you could have before said, look, I'm just brushing my teeth, okay? Can you not get into every little thing? But now you're saying you want to get into every little thing.
Or I welcome when that little flame expands itself in a situation that I really hadn't anticipated. How do you cultivate that? I don't know how you cultivate that, except that the reward of it, I can't guarantee that everyone else is going to respond by saying, oh, wow, I love my new awareness. Awareness and consciousness are things that I value in my life. They bring all kinds of pleasures. I'm an intensity junkie. I like life that has a certain intensity to it. I'm not sure everybody would have the same value in finding that equally rewarding. But it does tell me that you're definitely onto something and finding the positive way, a non-guilty way of moving people into a non-zombie approach to the resources that they're consuming and ways of possibly doing it better. I think you're onto something. I think that there are probably lots of other ways I haven't given thought to going with positive affect, positive benefits, successful actions, increasing successful actions, or a word I don't like using, but intervening in ways that are in synchrony, moving in the direction that people are already moving in. So in very positive steps. I mean, the way you want to increase people's awareness of everyday things that they can do to help environmentally.
I'm glad you mentioned consistent, I forget the language you use, but consistent with where they're already going. I will not describe it as positive. I will not describe it. I mean, my book, Leadership Step by Step, there's a chapter, one of the exercises is to avoid using for a week the terms good, bad, right, and wrong. Because if I say, well, this is positive, someone else says, well, I have different values. I think something else is positive.
Right.
And then we're just in a debate over. So to me, I don't try to get people to do positive things. I try to have people share what they value, what they care about, and I help them act by what they care about.
Right.
I think that there are enough people in the world who value clean air, clean water, clean land, and that's what I want to work on, that I can work with people like that. And I think there's billions of them. I think 7.6 billion or whatever the number is. And so I don't want to say positive and negative but otherwise, yeah, it's meaningful for the person.
Right.
That's what I'm shooting for.
Right. And it's going in the direction, it's easy enough to incorporate because it's moving in the same direction that people are already moving in. There's not an opposite force that has to be applied.
So I had a feeling like I could have described some things as you do. For me, it was mostly around food at the beginning of realizing, now, when I started shopping at farmers markets, at the beginning, I didn't know what all these things were. Chard versus kale was a mystery to me. And so I wouldn't get it because I didn't want to go in a place where I was confused and to know what I was doing. And then once I got started, now I want things that I have, like stinging nettles. What's that? I want to try that.
Right. But that's what happens when your awareness is awakened and you understand, I can work with any kind of food. Then it becomes a challenge to encounter any kind of food and do something with it.
Yeah, let the record show that when she said a challenge, there was her eyes light up in a way that is a very
positive
thing that you really like. Yeah.
She used a word that we don't want to use, but yes. I mean, no, I see challenge as the way of being alive. I don't want to live my life in a rut of doing everything the same every day. I want change in my life. I want to be stimulated. I want new activities all the time, new conversations.
If I extrapolate in my life, from what you're talking about, where it goes. Now, for some people, it plateaus and levels off, and they think, okay, great. Now I know what to do when I brush my teeth. I know what to do when I use sponges, and good, done. And then it never occurs to them that their SUV might have some issues, or but to me, if you keep pulling at the thread, the sweater that unravels is our values in growth and externalizing costs. And then you start realizing everything you do that's based around those things, usually not because of Well, how can you tell when you're in a system? I once read I think it was in The Fifth Discipline, but I forget. You can tell when you're in a system when you feel compelled to do something. And when we feel compelled to, like I went down to get water and the woman was like, here, use this. And she's handing me a paper cup, a disposable cup. And to me, it felt like she's like, how about this? I'm going to take some dog poop and like smush it in your face. That's that's the feeling that it
right.
Maybe not quite so intense, but I'm like, why don't you step in some dog poop? That's what it felt like. Like, except it wasn't me feeling it. It would be me, it would be like me stuffing it in someone else's face. Like, why don't you stuff some poop in someone's face? Except the poop actually, for the environment, is more healthy than the disposable cup.
There you go.
Yeah.
Choose a different metaphor.
Yeah. And well, for me, it would be like, why don't you instead have some candy? Which people are like, oh, I save candy and sugary things for treats. I'm like, treat? That's a punishment. The treat would be fruit. Punishment, a brownie would be punishment to me now. Now I used to like brownies. But that's what happens if you keep pulling at this thread. You start feeling like, oh, what was I doing? And what's going on? And I'm going to tell you where you say this makes you think of me. I'm going to tell you what I think of. Like when I turn off the light, when I leave the room, even if it's like, I have to think to myself, what's the calculation of if I turn it off and back on again, if I'm coming back in, it's like, if you're going to be gone for a minute,
right.
What makes me think of these things, what brings my awareness up, takes me back to, I think, 4th grade, when we learned about the Constitution, the United States Constitution. I forget which article it is, but it says the highest law of the state laws, federal law trumps state law. But something trumps federal law. The Constitution is the highest law in the land. Oh, no, it's not. Treaties with foreign countries are. And to roughly, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, I'm like, why would treaties with foreign countries supersede our own laws? And it took me a while. We learned it. So the deal is, if you make a treaty with a foreign country and then you can just undo it, you have to honor it. If you don't honor it, you will never get any treaties with foreign countries. And your word to others, if you don't hold it above to yourself, no one will do business with you. And I don't mean business in the sense of just commerce.
Right, right.
And ever since then, I've thought my duty to others, this is very closely related to do unto others, the golden rule, which as far as I know is in like every culture ever. That is what I'm thinking of. When I turn on the light, yes, I get light, or let's say turn on an air conditioner. And it's been years since I've turned on an air conditioner. When I turn on an air conditioner, yes, of course it makes the air against my skin will feel more comfortable. And, there's this part about the rest of the world, that it'll pollute the rest of the world. And I have to calculate to myself, to what extent is my comfort, how do I balance that with pollution? Because the comfort is fleeting. And I live in a place where people have lived for tens of thousands of years, at least something like 10,000 years. And they didn't always have air conditioning. And
no, they had an ice age.
And they weren't all dying all the time. And possibly they were happier. I don't think they were all on opiates and addicted to sugar and stuff like that. And we are today. And I think possibly it's worth a shot for me to try to go in that direction, toward awareness, away from sleepwalking. So I got, again, this double effect. 1, I'm going to hurt others. And 2, I could benefit myself. Now, on the flip side, or I could be comfortable.
But also, what I think is interesting about what you connected to is your initial, pardon the word, revelation of what it meant, of you learning the meaning of having a treaty with others and why that has a high value. That must have been a pretty cool aha moment for you.
Yeah, this is now like 40 years ago, so I don't really remember it. It's memories of memories, but I know that that's where it came from. And yeah, it was a formative learning, something formative for me, and has never left. And that combined with science in particular, I would think of the conservation of energy. I can't turn on a light. I can't do anything that requires energy without it coming from somewhere. And I think some people feel like here's something that in many people's mind I think is the same thing. Maybe I can kind of drive this car this time and it won't really count. Also, maybe I can eat this sweet and maybe it won't really count. Maybe those calories will pass through me in some secret way. And so we have a society that's like bursting at the seams with pollution, bursting at the seams with waste and trash, and bodies that are bursting at the seams with fat that they don't want. I think from a leadership perspective, very similar emotions going on, very similar thought process of like, oh, maybe this won't count. So I think that the response to what you said about my insinuating, or my behavior, my perspective insinuating it into your life, I think the response is, you're welcome.
Right, no, it's a very positive thing, yes.
Oh, the one place I will use good, bad, right, wrong is for myself. Like if I think something is...
Because you know your values.
Yes, there's no question of imposing it on others. If I think eating a mango tastes good to me, so I don't have to say, I don't think anyone thinks like, Josh thinks it must taste good to me too. So now I'm gonna talk about what the thing that this kind of touches on, about the thing that's been on my mind. Unless, should we stay on here for a bit? Or?
No, I think we pretty much exhausted this.
On my mind is that last month, I think, or earlier this month, I spoke at Google and they invited me to speak on starting an environmental podcast. So I have one, so I was happy to. And there's a guy there who was not from Google, but he was there. And
just an audience member?
Yeah. Well, he wanted to learn about podcasting. Now, he later told me that he understood that it was going to be a podcast on a talk on starting a podcast. Did not know that it was on the environment. I don't know who the people in the audience are. So this guy is a very hardcore hardcore Trump supporter. He has a podcast, or he's got a site called magamedia.org. MAGA as in Make America Great Again. Trump's very pro-Trump. Is a slogan, one of his slogans. So he comes in and thinks he's going to get a talk about how to start a podcast, and I say we're going to talk about starting an environmental podcast. He later told me he thought this is like a 2-hour event. So he's like, oh no, what have I got myself into? What do I have to deal with? And he says he got out his laptop and started looking me up. And because he expects the same message from me that he gets from virtually everyone. This is what you're doing that's wrong. This is what to do different. You should be ashamed of yourself. You should feel guilty. This is what he expected.
Right, and that drives defensiveness or just hardened retreat into his own camp.
I wouldn't say, you might put it that way, although I think he would say...
Well, that's what we're experiencing in our culture so much.
I don't think he would call it a retreat. He's not... My read of him is that he is in no way ashamed of his views. He thinks this is a great time for America because he looks at the things that Trump is doing that he likes, and he says this is great.
But he was closing himself off before you, by what you talked about, before he, as a captive member of the audience, had to hear what you had to say. He was not really an eager audience.
His site describes, when it talks about climate, it attacks AOC and Greta
and the Green
and
Revolution.
And the Green New Deal.
New Deal.
Attacks those as a hoax perpetrated by scientists who want to continue their funding, and they're duped, and the whole liberal side of culture is duped. And I think that he would not feel what he was doing a retreat any more than if you were attending a lecture.
Sure.
And it turned out that it was about flat earthers. You would say, and no, I'm sorry, it was about flat earth and saying the earth is flat. You would probably not say, I'm retreating away from this.
No, it wouldn't, but an observer, a third party observing, would see people on either side retreating in the sense of not eagerly listening and not having their ideas changed by the other party.
I think you would eagerly listen to find out what was so wrong about what I was saying. what he anticipated I would
Or
say.
so
If he heard-
listening with an offensive attitude and a defensive stance.
If you want, I can put you in touch with him.
Uh-huh.
We're both now speculating into areas that I can't. You know as much as I
guess,
do.
yeah, right.
So, but I can tell you that he would. I'm sure that he would say he expected me to say the same things that he had heard, and maybe I'd say it slightly differently, but it would be the same type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know anyone who likes to be told what they've already heard before a million times.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started talking, or I guess I continued talking about the environmental stuff. And he heard a message that he had never heard before. I talked about my behavior, about things that I was doing myself. I asked what people cared about. And I offered ways for them to act on what they cared about. So I brought someone up from the audience and asked that person, what do you care about? And would you care to act on that? And I think the person really enjoyed the experience. Actually, I posted on my podcast, they record the audio and just little bits of the video, so you can see a little bit of the video. And like just 30 to 60 seconds, like 5 of those things. I wish they'd recorded the whole thing. And you can hear the whole 2 hours of the conversation. And if anyone wants the details. Oh, also, if anyone's thinking about starting a podcast, it's also very effective instruction on starting a podcast. So he got a message that was different than he expected and contacted me later and said that message he liked. And he was interested in bringing that message to his audience.
Which message was that?
Well, the message of my podcast, the message that you're talking about, of acting by your sharing, unearthing your environmental values.
Right. And he wanted to share that with his audience in terms of mobilizing them to do something pro-environment, or do you know why he wanted to share that with his audience?
Watch the conversation. It went up, I think, yesterday, which is why it's on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I tweeted about it, he tweeted about it. And there's a lot of tweets that clearly they didn't, well, as best I could tell, they didn't listen, and they're just like, it's a hoax, it's a hoax. Then there's a bunch of people who are like, this is an interesting conversation. This is a great conversation. So I believe that he believes that there are some environmental issues in the world. Now, most people, they hear environment, they think climate. I don't think anyone could walk around New York City and say there's too little garbage in the world.
Yeah, right.
So, but he mostly talked about climate. But I think that he agrees that there are issues that most people would like it to be different. I mean, if I talked about mercury in the groundwater, probably people want less, not more. And he didn't talk about that, but I bet if I asked him, he would say, yes, I prefer less mercury in the groundwater.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, he would also say, let's balance that against business interests and so forth. But we didn't get into that level of detail. I think that he would like something to happen, but it's been very politicized. And so for him to, and I'm sure he also expects that there are people who do have interests that they want to protect, and he doesn't want to protect those interests. They're interests that are counter to his. So for him, he can't really do anything about the environment because one side that I would think he would say there's one side that he disagrees with that has co-opted it all.
Right, and he's lumping it all together as well. Or has.
I can't
Can I infer that?
I can't speak to that.
Uh-huh.
I think that there's nothing for him to grasp on that isn't poisonous to him.
Right, okay.
Let's not say poisonous, let's be more specific. There's nothing he can grasp on that isn't somehow pummeling him with self-righteousness
mm-hmm.
and doubtful science.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone comes along and says, I'm doing these things because I value these things, and maybe it'll help others, I don't know. But as a matter of personal integrity, this is what I'm doing. Which actually is contrary to what most of the people who are saying they aren't doing it. Because if you look on the site, there are pictures of Al Gore's mansion. I don't know, is it Al Gore's mansion? I don't know. But it's definitely examples you can find of people who are saying don't do X who are doing X. And I'm still doing some things, but a lot less than others.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is intriguing to him. And I think he wanted to bring, so what did he want to bring? I don't think he wanted to mobilize his listeners. I think in him, there's something that says, I would like to act in this area. I would like to do something. There are problems. We can't grow forever. And maybe there's a way that we can do it in a way that isn't so alienating to people that he likes. So he had me on, and that's the kind of conversation he had. He was like, so tell me about what you do, and tell me about this transformation that you had and why you're doing these things. And I answered these things. And partly he dangled a few things about, like, I brought up Greta Thunberg first. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a hot button issue, because I don't read a lot of this. You said I do Twitter, but I don't really. It's auto. Most of the posts are automatically done by when I post my podcast. It's on my blog. It automatically goes there. Mm-hmm. I post a few things here and there, but I don't know what this big. Apparently, she's being attacked, and I don't know what the deal is. And don't tell me, because I'm not interested.
Right.
But there are people who feel very strongly against her, and so I think there's maybe some interest in, like, am I going to defend her?
Including the president, by the way, who's made some really invidious remarks.
All right. Apparently the request not to tell me about it didn't. Please don't tell me about it.
No, he's called her mentally ill.
I'm asking you not to.
Yeah, right.
So I'm not going to engage on that, and I think he wanted me to engage on that as well.
Right.
But that wasn't really interesting to me. What's interesting to me is how I feel when I do these things.
Right.
How you feel when you do these things.
Right.
And how I believe that spreading facts and figures and doom and gloom is not effective. Or it's effective at getting people to treat it as a thing to talk about as opposed to something to do. And when they do it, they stop sleepwalking and they start going toward joy. And to me, it's joy. To you, it's awareness and consciousness. To me, it's joy and delicious and community and connection. And now okay. I went to the climate marches a few months ago, September, October, I forget, when Greta was here. And did I tell you about this?
No.
So I went, it happened to be that I had a couple meetings scheduled that day. One was at Stern, NYU's business school, and one was another business meeting. So I went, and then went up to Stern, and went back, and then went to this other meeting, and then went back again. So I went to it 3 times. And because I had a meeting at Stern, I dressed business casual, I guess, business appropriate. Blazer, shirt with a collar. I get to the event at the beginning, and I went early because I had a message I wanted to get out. I wanted to see if I could talk to people anyway, it was really big and much more chaotic than I expected. I've been trying to put my finger on it. I can't explain exactly why. Here's a big thing that happened. I went in, and no one really talked to me.
When you say you went in?
I went to, it met at Foley Square, in front of the building where I do law, where I do, the court building, where I do jury duty.
Oh, okay. So you were in Foley Square.
Yeah.
Most likely.
Yeah. But first I met the Sunrise people, and that was in front of Tweed Hall, which is a block away, or a couple blocks away. So I wanted to talk to some people there and see if I could do something active besides just participating. Mm-hmm. And I didn't try to engage with people that much, but no one really tried to engage with me either. I don't remember the details. But later, a friend of mine who was my connection to there, who is an organizer there, he showed up, and I started talking to him, and people were like, oh, you know each other. And then people started talking to me more. My read was that I didn't feel comfortable when I was wearing the blazer. I looked like a business person. Mm-hmm. I took it off and talked to this guy, and people were more comfortable with me. That's my read. I didn't feel comfortable, and I also felt if I probably behaved more environmentally than almost anyone there. But I appeared to be someone who's business. Right,
and people were making assumptions about you based on the way you were dressed.
I wasn't concerned about. I wasn't.
But they wouldn't engage with you because...
That didn't enter my mind, how they thought about me. What entered my mind was, I would think business people, are the ones to influence the most. And they disengaged. That was my read. They should feel the most welcome. But what I felt like there was a political left movement that was there long before the climate issues were there. And they were like, climate, let's take that and make that our issue. Mm-hmm. And let us beat the others. Mm-hmm. They are wrong, we are right. And I felt uncomfortable about that. I don't view it as a political issue. There are laws that say don't cross a double yellow line, don't go through a red light. Mm-hmm. Nobody talks about these as regulations and red tape that hampers progress. We all recognize if there were no stoplights, people would run into each other. It does stop traffic flow at times. And that's how I view environmental issues. I don't think there's a conservative and liberal position on should we cross the double yellow line. And yet the environment has become very politicized. People talk about the EPA and stuff, and about how Republicans were supported these things in the past and so forth. And I look forward to a day when people look at this as no one wants their kid to have asthma or for lead to lower their children's IQ. No one wants that. No one wants to cross the double yellow line. I mean, I guess that there are times you think I can zip through, and maybe if one person does it, every now and then it'll be okay. But generally we agree, don't cross the double yellow line. And I look forward to a day when we look at things that way. But I felt that this climate march was the opposite direction.
So what you're telling me is that, yes, you said you need to engage the suits, the business people. They're the ones who need to be engaged on the climate issue. But I'm agreeing with you. I mean, I think that it's all these other people who've latched onto the climate issue in ways that alienate lots of other people because they've made it this moral finger-pointing imperative. They need your message at least as much as the business people do.
Yes, I agree. And I can't get it to them because they tell me I'm already doing as much as I can. I can't do any more.
But it's the method. But it's not the doing. It's how they're doing and why they're coming up against the resistance that they get. I mean, so it's their method and their approach that, in a way, are hampering progress.
That's my perspective. And this conversation the other day with magamedia.org is, I'm thinking that the right can only hold out so long before they also feel like there's some environmental thing here going on. We got to do something about this. And I think that the right, I anticipate most likely we're not going to get our act together, and the problems are going to get really big, and there's going to be wars.
Right. But we don't want to wait until we're Flint, Michigan, and our water is poisoned.
On a national basis, you mean?
Or in New York or any major big city, although Flint is nothing to sneer at.
I believe that the most likely outcome, and what I'm working against, is that the environment will continue, our behavior will continue to lead the environment to where it can less and less support life and human society. And as human society has problems, we'll fight with each other, we'll point fingers instead of taking action. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter what people think is a better outcome if what they actually do is point fingers and fight over resources.
Yes.
And then these things escalate, and you kind of this is an outcome that I think is the most likely if people don't act strongly. Mm-hmm. And I'm acting strongly, and I'm doing the best that I can in an area that I think no one else is acting, that I think is very important. And I would like to not have that happen. If that were to not happen, I think a large part of Americans and global citizens, people all around the world, that is, I think there's a chance that the people on the right, that the people on the left are writing off as the enemy, that these people I think that they just like burning fossil fuels or whatever it takes to earn some profit, that they just want to get profit, and whoever gets hurt, fine. Now, I don't think that there are people who just think, I just want profit and it doesn't matter who gets hurt. And so if you act that way, if you believe someone is that way and you act and communicate to the people that that's what you think of them and that's not what they think of themselves, your ability to influence them drops through the floor. But we want to influence them. If we don't influence them and they won the last election. That was extraordinarily influential and very, very effective in changing environmental behavior of all Americans. Mm-hmm. Because we could have people listening to this now could have long ago reduced their impact if they're hurting things, if they're reducing, not hurting, if they're reducing Earth's ability to sustain life in human society. And anyone who thinks that they're pushing the limits on what they could do, they're not even close. Otherwise, they'd be full of joy you're or not joy, awareness. In your case, would be awareness and consciousness, and you could be well ahead of where you are, but for the last election, you could have been well ahead of where you are. Now, Jonathan Haidt, who brought us together, he writes about how liberals and conservatives have different values. And conservatives, one of the values that he says that they have that liberals don't recognize as a value is, what does he call it? I mean, there's disgust and purity. That's one axis, if I remember right. I haven't looked this up recently, so I'm impressed with myself. Another was order or hierarchy. They work together more effectively, according to Jonathan Haidt, that they like to come together and work together as a team.
Right, there's probably a lot less noise in the system. Yes.
There's a part of me that's thinking, I think that they really love clean air, clean water, clean land as much as anyone. In fact, possibly more if they value purity, and could be more effective if they value getting together as a team and working together. And now I'm thinking, I don't think anyone's remotely, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think anyone's trying to reach the right. I think they're trying to pummel the right. I'm sorry, I should say they're trying to reach them in terms of beating them. And I think if someone tells me, you don't care about the environment when I do, you just want to profit at the environment's expense, I think, well, you don't know who I am, so I'm not going to listen to you. Now, it takes two to tango.
And by the way, they do want to profit. You know, I would, because any company wants to profit, but the pushback is at the environment's expense. I mean, and what we've done is we've forced them out on a limb to argue that no, to absurd lengths to argue that no, it's not really at the expense. So you hear these really crazy, twisted arguments sometimes.
I don't think that's what, I think that they say, you want to profit too. Look at you, look at Al Gore's mansion.
Right, so what you're telling me is that we're reaching the wrong, we're preaching to the wrong values in these people, that we're not addressing the things that matter most to them. They're really heartfelt core desires.
I'm describing what's led me to new conclusions. I'm not trying to influence what other people do. I'm not saying what they should or shouldn't do. I hope
you just want them to care about the environment.
Everyone cares about the environment. I will not say, hold on, I will not say so-and-so doesn't care about the environment. Right. If you say so-and-so doesn't care about the environment and they do, then you've lost your ability to influence them.
I agree.
Your credibility drops.
I was actually going beyond that, but you're right, the language matters. What you want to do is stimulate someone to act on what they can.
I'm not talking about what. Okay, spreading facts, figures, doom and gloom. I think that's what most people are doing. Most people on the left.
I think facts are important.
I'm not going to stop them from doing what they're doing. What I am doing is I'm trying to use the practice of leadership that I found effective. My role models, to some degree, a lot are Dr. King, Mandela, Gandhi, but also Eisenhower, Patton, John Wooden, people who are effective at leading others. I'm not aware of any leader in any field outside of the environment that remotely says, make other people feel guilty.
Right.
Or fill them with facts.
Right.
That doesn't motivate people. It often motivates people to argue back. That's why you keep saying, what should they do? I'm not telling people what they should do. What I'm telling you is that I think that there's a huge untapped community that is now being browbeaten.
Yes, browbeaten.
And so I try to look at it from the perspective of someone, I disagree with them on many issues. In particular, they're saying what I do is acting on a hoax. Now, I don't believe I'm acting on a hoax. So
that's why facts do matter, to a degree.
To say facts matter is to say I'm right and you're wrong. They have facts too.
No, facts are not judgmental.
People can cherry pick. You've heard the phrase lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Of course.
I can pick out facts. I can pick out things. When someone says this is a fact, you must accept. It's saying you must accept the way I look at things. And they can say, well, look at one of the biggest things I learned in the environment was when I was talking to a friend of mine who he kept pointing out all these flaws in the science. And I kept sending him more and more what I thought were facts, and he kept pointing out more and more flaws. And no one can know all this stuff. And for every fact you tell me about the environment, I, who probably acts more than you do, can point out flaws in what you're talking about.
Well, but don't you think it matters that it's a fact that there's X percentage of lead in drinking water?
I'm not going to engage with you on this because
it's important to know that here's a system that has to be fixed, and to contemplate ways in which to fix the system so that people aren't being poisoned.
I want to influence people who are right now not being influenced.
Yeah, okay.
You want to talk about facts and figures?
No, I don't
have time for that.
I don't want to exclusively talk about facts and figures. That's not what I'm contemplating as the main method of approach. But I do want to say that there is a point at which facts do matter. And facts as facts, not political, just pure little pieces of information. And not to be used, by the way, as weapons.
I've devoted much of my life to science.
Mm-hmm.
I have a PhD in physics, and it was about observing nature. Since I found the joy and community and connection in acting on my environmental values, I've done more research because action leads to research more than research leads to action.
I agree.
So I've done plenty of this stuff, and I probably know as much as, not anyone, but I know a lot. There is as much doubt in my mind as anyone I've met. I have come to conclusions.
Wait. You're making a blanket statement that there is as much doubt in your mind on everything? I don't believe that, Josh.
I have no conclusive argument to say everyone should follow me. Everyone should come to the same conclusion.
This is not what we're discussing.
Yeah, hold on. I want to get off of this completely. I will not engage with you on this.
Okay.
If you want to know, read Limits to Growth, read Alan Weissman's Countdown, read, this is my grounding. It is not effective in leading people, and you're sucking me into something that I think is counterproductive. I do not have for him, if you just accept these facts and you'll come to the same conclusion as I do. I have opinions that there's a lot of doubt in them, and I can't say for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you read St. Crispin's Day speech, Henry V, or you read I Have a Dream, or you read George Patton's speech to the Third Army, you will see that there's not a lot of facts in there.
Right, because
and these
you're
are
trying
much
to
more
motivate
effective.
people.
And if I go down with you and say, yes, facts are important, then what I'm saying is those people who disagree with me, you disagree with the facts, not me. And they say, well, I have my facts. And then we're back where we started. And it's a matter of, well, they won the presidency. That's not effective. That's, in fact, counterproductive. That's been my experience.
Right, but you hear the word fact and you're immediately jumping onto argument because the facts have become this contentious matter.
No, that's not the way I look at it. I hear the word fact and I think to myself, what if I were someone who disagreed with you? How would that sound to me? It would sound like you're browbeating me. It would sound like you're saying you're right and I'm wrong.
But I'm not suggesting it's used as a weapon. I was just simply
trying
to establish that there is a point at which facts do matter, because
I'm not going to engage with you on this. How would it sound to you when someone who disagrees with you says, these are the facts?
I would pay attention to facts. I'm not. It isn't an issue with me the way it seems.
How does it?
The way I'm hearing it.
How does it sound? How would it sound to someone who's a Trump supporter if you say these are the facts? The sea levels are rising, carbon levels are going up. There's a causation. How would it sound to them?
Well, wait.
How would it sound to them?
I'm not
I'm-
arguing that you're
I'm not-
using the facts as a weapon.
I'm not asking about
But they
that.
do.
This is going to be very uncomfortable. Imagine you're
I
a Trump
wouldn't
supporter.
use them. I wouldn't use them as the instrument of motivating them
This is
to
a really
action.
hard thing that I'm asking here.
But-
how would you feel? This is empathy for someone you disagree with.
Right, I understand that.
Imagine you're a Trump supporter.
Right,
There's tens of millions of people like you, maybe hundreds.
right.
Maybe around the world, more than tens of millions, more than hundreds of millions. How would it sound to you if someone said, facts matter? How would you feel?
I can't get out of that position because my whole existence is predicated on the knowledge that facts matter.
I'm not asking that.
But
How would you
wait,
feel?
they're not to be thrown in people's faces and weaponized. That is a belief that I have. I wouldn't use them as the main instrument of change.
How
and,
you
and
intend to
not
use them
for
is not
motivating change.
how you intend to use them is not how the other people. You can want them to take it how you want them to, but they're going to take it how they take it.
Right, which is why I wouldn't
How
use
would they take it?
as
How would they take it? Try. I'm not asking you to agree with them. I'm not
Right.
asking you to support them. How would it
right,
feel to
right,
them?
right.
Everyone listening to my voice, how would it feel for someone who you disagree with to hear you say these are the facts? It's deeply uncomfortable.
I'm going to go back and say it depends on which facts and how they're presented to people. I do think that facts matter. I do understand certain things can be argued, and as I said, this is not the artillery to use. And,
So
and that's
you're not
even
gonna
the
you're not gonna
stance.
do it. It's too uncomfortable for you.
Too uncomfortable to what?
to empathize with a Trump supporter.
I can empathize to, depending on the situation.
Let's say you're in the psychology data office with Joshua Spodek, and he asks you to empathize with a Trump supporter.
I mean, there are people that I can empathize with on a whole array of issues, depending on.
So let me give you.
I mean, if they're 300% belligerent, well, it's going to be awfully hard to, a priori belligerent, aggressively.
You're not doing it. You all right?
It's hard.
I will let you off. I will let you off the hook.
I'm just saying it would be hard, and that I couldn't make a guarantee.
So I will let you off the
to
hook, and I'm not going to ask you to do it anymore.
Okay.
Here's how it feels to me. If someone says to me, "The facts matter," because I feel, oh yeah, you're going to pick the facts that matter to you and neglect the facts that matter to me. You're not going to listen to me. You think you're right and I'm wrong, and I don't want to talk to you because you don't understand me. And in fact, you sound more ignorant and you sound more self-righteous and mean. I'm not going to vote for you. That's the way I feel.
And I think you should feel that way when facts are the only lever that you use to try to change
and then I'm also gonna
someone's
say,
mind.
I'm also going to feel.
And I think we both agree on that's not the instrument to use.
And I feel like anything I say to you, you're just going to say, yeah, well, you're wrong. So I just.
Right.
The last thing I want to do is engage with you.
Sure. And you've encountered this system frequently enough to know that when positions are hardened, this is the dialogue that usually ensues.
That has nothing to do with it. I listen to them, and I try to put myself in the position.
Right.
Here's something that eased it. I teach leadership, and I teach people to do this, and I give people exercises, which I myself have done, to try to, what thoughts would go through someone's head? What beliefs would I have to hold in order to say things like that? Mm-hmm. Here's something I say to my students to make it easier. If anyone who's like the last person you'd ever want to empathize with? I'm going to go there. In World War II, we had to fight Hitler. I think that the generals that wanted to fight him had to empathize with him. They had to go in his head and think like him, feel like him. That's the last person I would ever want to be like. But that's why we the most want to empathize with him. What does he actually feel? What does he actually believe? Can I actually go there?
Knowing what someone is thinking and the way we use the word empathy carries sympathy as well as understanding. And what you're talking about is understanding without that affective component.
To me, it's to see the world from their perspective.
Which is very important.
Holding their values, holding and feeling the emotions that they feel and wanting to do the things that they do. Uh-huh. It's really deeply uncomfortable, but very rewarding.
Yeah, no, you have to, I mean, just to raising kids involves a similar understanding.
So why wouldn't you do it when I asked you to?
You
were doing anything but.
Because I think we were arguing differently over the meaning of facts matter. You were taking it into this system of disagreement.
There's no absolute meaning
whereas
of that.
I was not thinking of it necessarily as a contentious dialogue, although I know it often is used as such.
And it's not whether it's used as that. If someone can, when someone's, I'm not looking at it. I'm thinking of it from the perspective of the people that I want to influence. I'm not looking for the absolute meaning of it. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of people I disagree with. Mm-hmm. Why? I don't just want to listen to them. Mm-hmm. I don't want to just act like, okay, now I've heard you. Okay, but facts. And you keep saying, oh, it shouldn't be used that way. Oh, it's part of all those other things. But that simple, I'm looking at just that, and from the perspective of someone else.
Yeah, I still think that you and I are talking about these in a different way. And I think we should move on because we essentially agree that the facts are not the matter on which are not the tools to use as instruments of persuasion. And in fact, what we're both arguing against is an attempt at persuasion rather than a more understanding way of knowing what someone's values are and latching onto and getting them to latch onto.
I want to go even deeper. First, I want to say persuade and openness to be persuaded.
Yes, that has to come first. The people have to do the persuading of themselves. They have to be open to movement. They have to be not closed.
Yeah, and where I want to go deeper is beyond influence, before attempting to influence others, is my own perspective, my own where I'm coming from, my own source of motivation. Because what I hear, not as a Trump supporter, but just as me, when I hear someone, facts matter, I think that person feels so right that they're not open to being persuaded.
Right. That's what
I don't want to associate. I don't want to
You don't want to go into that pool.
Yeah.
I don't blame you.
And forget about putting aside for the moment effectiveness in influencing others.
Mm-hmm.
That view is so rigid, and so I know when I'm in arguments with people, especially with people that I love, and I feel I'm right. If you just would listen to me and stop talking, you would get this.
Here's my set of facts. Yeah, my facts matter.
It's this is like a life effort, not to be aware of moments like that and see what's going on. A big part of what I count as maturity is recognizing that in myself. Of course, there are things that I can't stop but feeling like I'm right about. But I really don't like myself when I'm self-righteous and trying to beat people over the head with it's not me. Look, it's not that I think that I'm right. It's just this is right, and I happen to agree with that. Now you should also agree with that, as if that's different, right?
Right.
It's not me that's right. I'm not trying to tell you that I'm right. It's the facts that are right.
Right. There's this independent.
And that starting point is, to me, I can't. It's very like that. That's why I raise my voice. Partly also because I know our conversations, we will shake hands at the end of this and not be like. I value that about you, is that I could say this with others and they'd just get very angry at me, and I think I read in your face now curiosity or something like that, but I think that is. Yeah, so that's why I have such a hard time with people on the left, is that starting point that is not my starting point.
Right.
And
the certainty that is the method. It's not just the certainty over the facts. It's the certainty that method is the way to get people to change their behavior.
Yeah, and
that's the part.
As far as the environment is concerned, I believe that starting point is certainly, it seems to me, counter to democracy, because it's trying to impose on others. Like everyone can vote for whatever reason they want. That to me is what democracy is about. That's why I like education so much.
Or
effective
they can
education.
make up their own mind.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they lost the last election, and I don't like that. I think a lot of that viewpoint gets a lot of votes for Trump. I don't want Trump elected next time. I mean, there's lots of other reasons that have nothing to do with democracy as well. Russian meddling and gerrymandering seem to have effects too. So I have to check. How long have we been doing this? Oh, we're over an hour. Well, I think
Okay.
I have no idea how many
And
people
not
would
too
listen to
many
this. We'll see. I mean, I raised my voice and we were talking over each other. I hope that we provided some fireworks for the listeners.
Sure.
I have no idea. Maybe they're like, sometimes they listen to people contentious and disagreeing, and I think, those idiots, can't they see how obvious it is, the synthesis of both of these perspectives?
If you're outside that system, yes.
So I propose, undone as we are, we nonetheless stop at this point and pick up it next time.